Hello, my name is Renee Jones, the Hope Bird, and I am developing a world of hope that brings transformation to nations. This is segment one of a three-part series called Beauty for Ashes. That is Isaiah 61 and 3 for those of you who are interested. In this series, I am going to talk about struggling with silence as it relates to victimization. Additionally, you will get first time peace as I read excerpts from early drafts of my upcoming book regarding how survivors can use both natural and spiritual steps to overcome residual effects of our adversities. To get started, I am going to share a little bit about my experience as a victim turned survivor, and I will share some points regarding how I became an adult free from the entanglements of my child abuse. Now, for those of you who may not know, the views expressed here are not professional views. They are personal views gained from life experiences, personal studies, and testimonies of other survivors. And I bring these tools before us in hopes that we will gain some insight from them, find our path to our maximum state of health and healing as well. So, that's it. Let's talk about it. After being abused, would you be surprised to know the Bible tells us we will have trouble in this life? Imagine that, right? That's John 16:33. And listen to this. There is no promise that God will immediately rescue us from our hardships or suffering. Yet there is a promise that even that which seems evil is designed for our good. And although our troubles may last for long periods of time, they will not last always. God has a plan for our lives, and regardless of our past, current, or coming situations, He can work through our issues to prosper us and give us hope. That is Renee's summary of Jeremiah 29:11, and I invite you to check it out for yourself. These scriptures are just a couple verses that helped me understand how in the world I could end up in child abuse in the first place, and how in the world my mother and other adults could knowingly abandon me, leaving me to contend and continue in that perverted situation, being powerless, and how I could have remained there until God delivered me years later. So, about me. Growing up, I had two parents, my mother and my stepfather. And there were two things that were sort of stand out in my childhood. One was the fact that I found God somehow in a household that made little reference to Him. And I developed a very strong relationship with God early in life because of my adversities. The second standout point about my childhood was this. When I was in fifth grade, I began to notice, it became apparent to me that my stepfather was abusing me. So while I was developing physically, he was also developing obviously inexcusable behaviors toward me. He was one of these men who drank to get drunk. And once he reached the point of being annoyingly intoxicated, he became extra friendly and immoral with both women and little girls in his so-called stupor. And there were times when he waited to use his drunkenness as courage to confront me with greater advancements of perversion. Eventually, my stepfather's abusive behaviors towards me backed me into a psychological prison where I dwelled for decades, both during and after the abuse. And as a child, I lived in that house under relentless threats of his at his whims. And I was in constant stress and fear is what I was because at any moment I thought he would find the next opportunity to further terrorize and molest me and seize it. So early one morning, my stepfather entered my bedroom supposedly to wake me for school. Well, the Spirit of the Lord rose up in me, and there was an all out face off in my bedroom between my stepfather and I. This time, I was furious, and he was afraid. And when the dust settled, he figured right when he thought it best to leave me alone moving forward. Because with the help of God, I had made up my mind that I was no longer going to tolerate his perverse and cruel treatment of me. Therefore, he let his next move be his best move, because he bought an alarm clock for me to wake up for school independent of his unwarranted assistance for the remainder of my adolescent days in that house. And that was the day the abuse ended for me. After so many battles lost, eventually I won the war because God showed up for me and he fought for me through me. Over the years, I gained a great deal of revelation about my family members, myself, and God. And what I learned about my family, my mother in particular, was my mother was fully supportive of me in most other areas of life. Although in carefully choosing her battles, strangely enough, she chose this specific issue to hold them, fold them, and walk clean away from me on, leaving me deserted and powerlessly exposed as a target and accessible prey. My mother's silence was her consent to her husband's ungodly treatment of me. Although I found I could not count on my mother in this particular instance to have my best interest at her heart in this matter, I still loved her. And I still do. Even though my mother on this, what I call this faltering family flight, my mother chose to put the proverbial face mask on herself and leave her child without oxygen. Yeah. But since then, God has done a miraculous work in my heart. He has taken me on a wonderful journey, and I've done intense interpersonal work where I have accepted all of the details of my truth. I have forgiven those who have wronged me in some way, whether they have asked for forgiveness or not. I did it for my benefit more than for theirs. And I have taken all of the bad things that have happened to me, and I am now using them to glorify God. Now, what I learned about God was this. God was with me through the abuse the entire time. God protected me, and God has always provided a way for me. This time it was huge. He provided a way for escape for me. And I cannot tell you how grateful I am. And today I am fully persuaded, because of all of this, that God is who he says he is. And the day I stood up to my stepfather, I had no idea what he was thinking. I didn't know if he envisioned his wife and his children rushing into that room and finding out that he had been, being confronted with the fact that he was a perverted man, their father. Not that my mother didn't know about her husband's behavior, but those children, they may have been startled to know, the truth. I don't know if he thought the police would come, he would be thrown into handcuffs and toted away and thrown into jail for what he had done to me and to others. I don't know. Maybe God allowed giant, winning, warring angels to stand in my stead that day. Maybe that's what he saw. Because maybe God knew that He did not need to see a physically inferior female child who was absolutely no physical threat to him that day. I don't know, but whatever God did, God fixed it so that the tormented life I led had come to an end. And what a glorious day it was for me. And what I learned about myself was this: I had the power and I used it to break the silence. Without uttering a word, I was able to say no. And for a moment, it seemed as if the world stood still on its axle. For the first time in my life, I had taken the power out of the hand of my enemy, who was actually my abuser. And it was amazing to me because, in retrospect, many years later, I sat down and I looked back over my life, and I realized that those kind of opportunities kept coming up in my life, and I kept rising to the occasion. And every time I did, I found more strength. I became more powerful on the inside. The woman I had become was powerful, even in the poverty, lack, and want I was living in. Even though I was a broken female who had been abused and who had no real father in the world. None that I knew, none that I had a relationship with. I had daddy issues, to say the least. I became powerful every time I lifted my voice, every time I spoke up for myself, every time I chose me instead of choosing to stay stuck in the muck and the mire, in the tribulations I was facing. Every time I stood tall for myself, I was waging war for my soul, and I was willing to do that again and again, unbeknownst to me. I didn't realize it was happening when it was happening, but I'm glad it did. And what I learned about you is, every day is a new opportunity for you to conceive, to endure labor, and to deliver that which you have been struggling for what seems like far too long with. That thing that you are impregnated with, you have become full of. It's time. In due season, it is time for you to deliver that gift to the world. And the thing about it is, your gift, the miraculous gift within you, it will always let you know when the time has come to deliver. You only have to be courageous enough to see it through. And remember, God is a God of His word. He will deliver you in due season. So be of good courage and wait on the Lord. And when you do these things, you too will gain your beauty for your ashes. Now, apparently our time has run out. So I always like to try to say something that inspires those who have been victimized, as well as those who support our community and try to better understand us. Thank you for that, by the way. And it is my hope that this share from the heart has found you well, and moreover, leaves you overcoming the entanglements of your life.